She didn't scream. She didn't call the police. And she definitely didn't know his name. All Seris Vale did was press a towel against a stranger's wound and tell him to stay awake. By sunrise, that single choice had quietly rewritten her life. Because the man she helped wasn't just injured. He wasn't just dangerous. He was owned by a world that doesn't forgive witnesses. And the most terrifying part, he never asked her to save him. He only asked her not to disappear. Hello family, welcome to this channel. Drop your city in the comment section so I can send you special greetings. Now let's go deep into the story. Seris Vale had built her life around being forgettable. Not weak, not invisible, just unnoticed. She worked nights, paid cash when she could, spoke only when necessary. In a city loud with ambition and desperation, she survived by leaving no echo behind her. That's why she noticed the man on the ground. Not because he was bleeding, but because he didn't look surprised by it. He was leaning against the brick wall behind a closed laundromat, breathing slow, controlled, like pain was something he negotiated with, not something he feared. His jacket was ruined. His hands were steady. His eyes, sharp even in exhaustion, tracked her movements without asking for help. Seris should have walked away. Instead, she knelt, tore fabric, pressed down, counted breaths. She didn't ask questions because answers create obligations. When she left, she was certain she'd never see him again. By morning, her name was already being spoken by people she had never met. By afternoon, a black car waited across the street from her apartment. And by evening, the man from the alley stood in front of her, clean, composed, untouched by the night that nearly killed him. He didn't thank her. He didn't apologize. He only said this. People believe stability when they see it standing beside me. For a short time, I need you to be seen. Seris didn't ask what would happen if she refused. She asked something far more dangerous. What happens if I agree? He paused, and that pause told her everything. Seris Vale was already halfway home when she noticed the blood. Not the dramatic kind. No trail, no splatter. Just a dark smear along the concrete near the back wall of the laundromat that had closed 2 months earlier. Most people would have missed it, or ignored it on purpose. Seris slowed anyway. The man was sitting on the ground, his back against the bricks, one knee bent, the other leg stretched out awkwardly. His jacket was torn near the ribs, darkened and stiff in one place. He wasn't unconscious. That was the strange part. He was very awake. Their eyes met. He didn't ask for help. He didn't flinch either. Seris felt that familiar internal warning, the one that had kept her alive for years, start to buzz. Trouble doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly, bleeding, and lets you choose. I'm not calling anyone, she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The man studied her face like he was memorizing it, not in a predatory way, in a calculating one. I didn't ask you to, he replied. His accent was light, controlled, not local. She exhaled slowly and knelt anyway. Up close, she could see the wound wasn't fatal, deep, but not panicked. Someone had tried to kill him and failed efficiently. That detail unsettled her more than the blood. She tore a strip from her scarf, pressed it against his side, and applied pressure. Don't move, she said. I wasn't planning to. They stayed like that for a while. Traffic hummed 2 streets over. Somewhere, music played too loud through an open window. Life continued, unconcerned. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, then lied. Serene. He nodded as if accepting a business card. You're calm. I'm tired, she corrected. When the bleeding slowed, she stood. She didn't wait for gratitude, didn't wait for instructions. Get help, she said, already stepping back. He watched her go. She didn't look back. By the time Seris reached her apartment, she had already convinced herself it was over. It was. The knock came at 9:12 a.m. Not loud, not urgent, just precise. Seris stared at the door from her kitchen, coffee untouched. She hadn't slept. Not from fear, she'd long learned how to function beside it, but from irritation at herself. Helping strangers was a habit she thought she'd broken. The knock came again. She opened the door halfway. 2 men stood outside, well-dressed, not flashy. Their shoes were too clean, their eyes too aware. "Seris Vale," one asked. Her chest tightened. "Who's asking?" "He would like to see you." She laughed once, short and humorless. "You've got the wrong person." The man didn't correct her. He simply stepped aside. The black sedan across the street idled like it had been waiting all morning. Inside, the man from the alley sat upright, dressed in a tailored shirt that erased all evidence of the night before. No bandages visible, no weakness on display. "Your real name suits you better," he said calmly. Her fingers curled around the doorframe. "You followed me." "No," he replied. "You were already being noticed. I just paid attention." That was worse. He gestured to the seat across from him. She didn't take it. "I don't want money," she said, "and I don't want problems." He nodded. "Then we agree." She blinked. "You don't look like someone who agrees often." "I don't," he admitted. "That's why I'm here." He explained it clinically. A fracture in his organization, rumors of instability, a need for visible normalcy, someone unconnected, unimpressed, unowned. "You," he said simply. Her mouth went dry. "You want a shield." "No," he corrected. "I want friction, something real enough to slow things down." Seris shook her head. "Find someone else." His gaze sharpened. "I did. They cost too much." Silence settled heavy between them. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. "Nothing immediate," he said honestly, "but attention doesn't unsee." That was the moment she understood. This wasn't an offer. It was gravity. That was all it took. A restaurant opening, cameras, quiet whispers. Sarah stood beside him, not touching, not smiling, just present, observant. Doyon Kestrel, because that was his name, never introduced her as anything specific. "This is Seris," he said, "nothing more." People filled in the blanks themselves. By the next morning, her supervisor asked questions. By evening, her landlord mentioned concerns. Doors didn't close violently. They closed politely. "You could stop," she told Doyon later that night. "Yes," he agreed, "but you won't." She hated that he was right. Not because she wanted him, but because disappearing had stopped being an option the moment she knelt in that alley. Over the following days, something shifted between them. Not intimacy, awareness. He noticed when she corrected him, when she refused his car and took the bus instead. When she asked about consequences instead of assurances. "You don't need me," she said one night. "You need the idea of me." He considered that. Ideas don't argue back. And I do. That's why it's working. But pressure builds cracks. When Seris finally learned what her presence had triggered, what it cost others, what it accelerated, she realized the truth too late. Standing beside power doesn't protect you. By the second week, Seris understood something she hadn't expected. Nothing dramatic had happened, and that was the problem. No threats, no confrontations, no scenes worthy of warning. Instead, her life was being quietly rearranged by other people's decisions. Her schedule changed without discussion. Her coworkers spoke to her more carefully, like she'd developed an allergy they didn't want to trigger. Even her friends, few as they were, checked the news before returning her calls. Visibility, she learned, wasn't loud. It was invasive. She met Doyon that afternoon in a place he didn't control, a public library cafe near the river. He arrived alone, no visible security, dressed so ordinarily that no one looked twice. That unsettled her more than the tailored suits ever had. "You don't need to keep doing this," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "You got what you wanted." He looked up from his tea. "Did I?" "People believe you're stable again," she said. "That's what this was about." "That's what it looked like it was about," he replied. She frowned. There's a difference. There's always a difference between what calms people and what changes them. She studied him, finally allowing herself to ask the question she'd been avoiding. What do you actually want? Doyon didn't answer immediately. He watched a child at the next table struggle to open a juice box. The mother didn't intervene. Eventually, the child figured it out, spilling half the contents and grinning anyway. I want, he said slowly, to stop reacting. That wasn't the answer she expected. My life, he continued, has been built on response. Someone moves, I counter. Someone threatens, I neutralize. Even peace has been temporary, just another pause between reactions. And I'm supposed to help with that, she asked. You already have, he said. People act differently when they think something ordinary matters to you. Seris felt a chill. I'm not ordinary. No, he agreed. You're deliberate, that's rarer. She stood. Deliberate doesn't mean disposable. I know, he said softly. That's why I haven't told you everything. That night, Seris lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing something worse than fear had crept in. Curiosity. The file arrived anonymously. No return address, no message, just a slim envelope slipped under her apartment door while she was at work. She didn't open it right away. She cooked dinner first, cleaned her kitchen, gave herself the illusion of control. Inside were articles, internal memos, fragments of conversations. Nothing illegal on its own, but together they painted a picture Doyon had carefully avoided showing her. Her presence hadn't just stabilized him. It had polarized everyone else. Executives loyal to the old order saw her as weakness. Rivals saw her as leverage. Employees saw her as proof that proximity, not loyalty, was the new currency. Seris sat on the floor, papers spread around her, heart pounding. This wasn't about protection. It was about acceleration. She confronted him the next morning. You let them fight over me, she said, voice tight. You didn't stop it. Doyon didn't deny it. I didn't start it either. That's not the defense you think it is. I needed to know who would move first, he replied. They always do. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You used me as a test. I used the situation, he corrected. You were already in it. Because you put me there. He finally looked unsettled. You stayed. Because you didn't tell me the cost. Silence stretched. I told you the truth I had, he said. Just not all of it at once. Seris stepped back. You don't get to decide how much truth someone can survive. No, he said quietly, but I decide how much chaos I can afford. That was the moment the illusion cracked. Not because he was cruel, but because he was honest about being strategic. Seris realized something terrifying. She had started to respect him. And respect, in a situation like this, was dangerous. A televised charity summit, corporate leaders, cameras everywhere, Doyon's name printed cleanly on the program beside hers. You don't have to attend, he told her. She smiled faintly. If I don't, the story writes itself. Yes, he agreed, it will. Backstage, moments before they were called out, Seris felt strangely calm. Not brave, not hopeful, just resolved. After this, she said, things change. They always do, he replied. No, she corrected. I mean for us. He looked at her then, really looked. You're leaving. I am, she said. Not today, but soon. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. That's fair, he said. The lights flared. Applause rolled through the hall. They stepped forward together, two figures framed as something unified. And it worked. The markets responded. The rumors cooled. Stability returned. But as Seris stood there, smiling for cameras that didn't know her name a month ago, she understood the truth she'd been circling. Some roles succeed because they end. And some people change you precisely because they don't stay. When the applause faded, she leaned close enough for only him to hear. I won't disappear, she said, but I won't belong to this either. Doyon nodded once. Then we've both learned something. The cameras cut away. And somewhere beneath the surface, consequences were already moving. Seris didn't leave immediately. That surprised even her. For days after the summit, she moved through the city with a strange dual awareness, half inside her old life, half standing in the shadow she had helped create. The attention softened but didn't vanish. It never did. Once a narrative includes you, it resists revision. She met Doyon one last time in a place neither of them could own, a riverside bench where joggers passed without recognition. He arrived late. On purpose, she suspected. Control expressed as courtesy. "You could have stayed," he said, sitting beside her but leaving space. "I know," she replied. "That wasn't a challenge." "I know," she repeated. "That's why I'm going." He watched the water. "If you leave now, people will assume things." "They already do," she said. "The difference is whether I let their assumptions decide my next move." Doyon nodded. "You were never difficult to predict, just impossible to place." She smiled faintly. "And you were never cold, just precise." Silence settled, not awkward, not intimate, honest. "There's something you should know," he said at last. "Your presence forced decisions I delayed for years." "That sounds expensive." "It was," he admitted. "But necessary." Sarah stood. "Then don't waste it." He looked up. "Neither of us wasted this." That was the closest thing to gratitude he would ever offer. And it was enough. Seris left the city quietly. No announcement, no farewell post. She took a job 2 states away, under a different schedule, with people who didn't recognize her face. She rented a place with thin walls and loud neighbors and found comfort in the noise. Meanwhile, the story continued without her. Analysts debated Doyon's transformation. Commentators praised his stability. Rivals retreated, unsure whether the absence of the woman beside him meant vulnerability or resolution. None of them knew the truth. That the shift had already happened. Doyon dismantled what depended on reaction. He reorganized power not around fear, but around predictability. Not kindness, never that, but clarity. The cost was enormous. Allies left, enemies tested him. And he let them. At night, alone in rooms built for strategy, he sometimes replayed the smallest moments. The way Seris corrected him without raising her voice. The way she asked about consequences instead of promises. She hadn't saved him. She had interrupted him. And interruption, he realized, was sometimes the only way out of repetition. Months later, Seris stood in a grocery store line, holding a basket with nothing remarkable in it. Bread, fruit, a plant she would probably forget to water. Her phone buzzed once. A message, no name attached, just a line of text. It worked, not because you stayed, because you left. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back. "Good, don't look for me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I won't," the reply came. "That's how I'll know it's real." Seris slipped the phone into her pocket. Outside, the air was cool, ordinary, uninterested in who she used to stand beside. She walked home alone, not erased, not rescued, not claimed. Just free enough to choose what came next. And somewhere else, a powerful man stood exactly where he was meant to be, changed not by possession, but by loss.